All right, you beautiful humans. The rumors that we may be getting a thinner Mac Mini this year might have a few of you concerned about Apple doing that Apple thing that they do, where they're taking away a feature or throttling the full capability of what these latest M1 Pro and M1 Max chips can do. And let me start off by saying that I'm not predicting when these new Macs are going to be showing up. I know there's an event around the corner, and I know that they're flying around, but Apple will release these on their own time. And I really want to address the leaks about the smaller footprint of this device because I've seen from quite a few of you out there that it sounds like you're going to be disappointed because we're going to go from a machine where you never, ever hear the fan, and all of a sudden you're going to go to fans blaring and thermal throttling and just a hot mess. But this M1 Mac Mini right here, we go way back to the last decade of 2021 and even getting to know each other at the end of the previous decade of 2020. And if you've been here with me since those days, then you know I am more than smitten about this machine. And some of those hopes that we have had that we might find ourselves in a place where the Mini could eventually evolve into something of a smaller pro level machine that may even have some of that modularity or at least some kind of upgradable functionality like the Mac Pro. But the thing is, my friends, we are the edge cases here, and Apple isn't interested in such a niche demographic. And if we do actually get that slimmer design, which I feel pretty good about this being the case, I'd like to help you through that thought process of what this means for your workflow. And let's use the 14-inch MacBook Pro as a point of reference, since apparently in the M1 Max, the fans just spin up constantly all the time. We're waiting around for those thermals to reach more of a balmy territory where those demands are more reasonable. And I should quickly pivot to say that the sarcasm is thick here because I can tell you that I rarely hear the fans in the 14-inch M1 Max, and that thermal throttling, it's not a myth, but and I know that we've created videos around this trying to like push it really hard, but it is really hard to replicate in the day-to-day. So with this being a strictly business move with a touch of a benefit to the consumer, yes, I do think that the consumer is going to be served here. There is a lot of unoccupied space in this current chassis, which, as I've said before, I understand that this was like a much easier move for them to make, just to use the old design, pivot to that, and get this thing out the door. And it was a risk that really paid off because these things continue to sell quite well even right now. But from a design perspective, at least from the Apple standards, and I've heard a lot of you talk about that, it seems to be tired and dated and deserves to be more of a centerpiece rather than stuffed in a drawer since the last update of about, I don't know, what, 12 years ago? But thankfully, if the leaks are true, I do believe that the plexiglass design, bringing back some nostalgia, will better accommodate the Wi-Fi and those Bluetooth issues that many of you have experienced on this particular device. And as far as the edge cases, when it comes to the M1 Pro and Max chips being placed into this particular device or the device that is to come out, I do think that there was this holdout that, okay, it'll be limited because it's in a laptop. So when the M1 Pro and Max went into those laptops, well, especially the Max, it's just like anything, like with a mobile CPU or GPU, we understand that the thermal headroom is not as large. So with that thermal headroom, we might actually be able to see an increase in performance because it wouldn't have to throttle back so soon, like if it was in a chassis that could manage that even better. But let's remember that at least in my workflow and what I have shared with you on this channel regarding my particular use case, that this machine, as it is now, it just doesn't quit. And I have literally pushed it to a point where I thought I was going to break it. And of course I didn't. And if you haven't checked out Alex Ziskind, and of course I'll link him up, he's a developer that he provides some really awesome perspective and what these machines can do within that space, which is one of the reasons why I've chatted with many of you out here about your desire to pick up one of these devices for development tasks. And I'll link up a resource for the sake of time because we got to move this along. And I don't want to oversimplify the difference of this type of architecture, having fewer instruction sets to move between, keeping that thermal footprint lower and having like a less power draw, like less power hungry than the x86 architecture. But this is the point that although I am thankful that Apple didn't make the current MacBook Pros thinner, because this, like, that design definitely didn't work out well with the previous iteration of Intel machines. And I honestly think that we are getting to a point where there will be some level of smaller footprint without having to sacrifice performance, because with the pipeline likely having 3 nanometer chips with up to 40 CPU cores, which is like ridiculous. We are going to have to find creative ways to push these machines anywhere near that level of capability. Although I think AI and software, I'm sure, will have their hands full in trying to make that accommodation. And I know that it's really boring stuff here, but it is an aspect to consider, that this comes down to manufacturing and having to figure out how to fit more into less. And really, I'm talking more along the lines of logistics. And being able to have a smaller footprint means more cargo that can fit on those ships. Apple has already done the market analysis. They know that people want these machines. People want the devices and they'll wait for them. But Apple also knows that if wait times aren't as much of an issue, then those that are kind of on the fence will likely get sort of accelerated and even more excited and go ahead and pick one of these up as their first Mac, like as their first machine. And that's just business. But as far as the few and far between, like Joey and Mike and Ashley, and including myself, we will just have to keep dreaming of the day that Apple wants to go ahead and shrink down that Mac Pro, because they'll want to go ahead and ship more of those devices. Although I do have a feeling that the modularity and the ability to upgrade may exist, but not necessarily on our own terms. And if you are curious about a price prediction from me, what I think, I'd say that the M1 is definitely going to stick around a little bit longer at that $699 price point, but anything Pro or Max is going to land somewhere in the neighborhood of $1199, maybe $1099. And that's a big maybe, because it's likely going to be starting with a larger SSD and 16 gigs of RAM minimum, just like, with the Pro. But they're going to have to figure this out, because they're going to have some trouble differentiating their line as far as those rumors that recently came out about the 13-inch MacBook Pro and what that looks like. So if that is true, I don't know. I still think that the MacBook Air is still a better choice in my opinion. But I really would love to hear from you. Let's chat it up. I'm serious. Don't be shy. I am active in the comments and I love to engage with all of you. So seriously, let's hang out. Until then, you go rock those faces. I'll catch you right back here on the next one.